How about if I just start at the beginning? You could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with us. And that's what the I Am Real world's about.
Well, that's a great question. One of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins. Brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Peer.
Welcome, everyone, to Chasing Giants, episode 70, brought to you by buyafarm.com. Happy Father's Day on June 20th, Don Higgins.
Happy Father's Day, Terry.
Great day that I'm not so much worried about me being honored, but it's a great day that we can recognize the privilege of what it is to be a father.
Yes, for sure. You have any good stories about your father growing up, particularly as they might relate to the outdoors?
Well, my dad wasn't really, he hunted before I was born. When he married, or I guess started dating my dad, my grandfather Lester and my mom's two brothers, they were all real big outdoorsmen. So my dad got into it for a little bit, and I always remember them talking about the story of when he was up on the mountain somewhere up in West Virginia or Virginia, and he said he never could stay awake, and he was up there hunting and leaned against a log, and when he woke up, he had a copperhead curled up between his feet. So, but yeah, my dad was a minister, and when I was little, ministers, of course, they don't make a lot of money anyway, but all of his spare time was always working on cars or doing construction projects and everything to try to provide for the family. So he really didn't get into hunting, but I would have liked to seen his face that day that copperhead was curled up between his feet.
Well, that's bringing out of a deep sleep on her.
But yeah, he was always supportive of me. He's helped me drag deer out and go looking for deer, and maybe one of these days he's shown a little interest in getting back into it now that my nephew is actually a youth minister at the church my father is a senior minister at, and my nephew is getting into hunting. So I think my dad's shown a little bit of interest. We might get him back into it.
Yeah, good deal.
What about your dad?
There's one story that I've shared a few times in seminars, and I think I even shared it in a magazine article once, but I think it's worth repeating probably for the listeners. I remember, my dad wasn't a hunter. I remember when I was a little kid, he went a few times for small game, but he really wasn't into anything like I was. But, the thing I remember was that he would always take time from his job. He'd always save vacation time to take me hunting. But back when I was a kid, the Illinois deer herd was just, it was just starting to be plentiful enough where they was having open season, especially in our part of the state, up in the agricultural area of central Illinois. And you would have to apply for a gun tag for the firearms season every year, and it was never guaranteed because there was always more. So, I remember we would send in our applications every spring for a deer tag, and we wouldn't know till midsummer if we was actually going to get to hunt that fall. But I remember one time I went to school, and there were some friends of mine that they would apply for those deer tags as well as I would, and they had one of them had an idea that I thought was just brilliant. So him and his dad, they would apply for tags and their names and his mom's name and his sister's name and everybody in the family. They would send in applications for everybody they could in the family, hoping that somebody got a tag, and they'd use that tag and go hunting on that tag. And I thought that was just a brilliant idea. And I came home. I remember coming home from school at night at the supper table telling my dad, because it was about that time of the year when he would be applying, telling my dad I came up with a great idea how we'd be guaranteed tags. We'd just apply we'd put our names in and put my brother's name and my mom's name, and we'd all apply, and surely somebody would get a tag, and we'd get to hunt that fall. And I was real proud of myself for that, what I thought was a great idea. And my dad lit into me, and he let me know that whatever we was going to do, we was going to do it right. And we wasn't going to cheat the system. It was illegal to be hunting on other people's tags. And if that's how I wanted to do things, I wasn't going to be hunting at all. So he wasn't near as impressed with that idea as I was. And looking back, he was definitely right. And he kind of set the stage, for, I guess, the hunter that I've become today, that just, whatever my brother and I wanted to do, my parents, both of them, were just fully supportive. They never tried to push us to do anything that they thought we should do, sports or whatever. They let us, find our own interest, and whatever our interests were, they helped us as much as they could. But the one thing that my dad made very clear was that whatever we did, it was going to be done right. And, I'll never forget coming home with that idea of applying for deer tags and everybody's name, and him coming unglued on me. And I'm looking back now, it's, I'm really glad that that's how it turned out. But, other fathers might have had a totally different, response to that. And, I think the reason that, I've been able to do what I have in the hunting industry is because of the foundation my dad set when I was just a kid. And that one lesson right there just stuck with me all these years.
Yeah, the neat thing about our job is we get to meet a bunch of really good people, and I think you're on the text list too. We got a text from our buddy Jimmy Hooks down in I believe he's in North Carolina, not South Carolina. I think North Carolina.
Yep.
But he sent a text out today wishing us a happy Father's Day, and said the essence of a father's role is to mirror God's own heart, and he quoted Psalms 86:15. It says, "You, O Lord, are a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness." And when I got that text message this morning, I was actually with my kids. And to reference something else, I'm going to put you on the spot to talk about from your seminars, is that statistic that you use when you talk about the role of a father in a household. I want you to give just a little bit of an overview about those statistics, because I think it's so important, the role that we play with these kids in our house.
Yeah, research has shown that in the family setting, if a child is the spiritual leader of the home, and I know it doesn't happen a lot, but there are situations, where the child is the spiritual leader in the home. If that happens, the odds of that child leading anyone in their family to Christ is only 3%. If the mother is the spiritual leader in the home, the odds of her leading anyone in the family to Christ is 17%. But if the man, the father, is the spiritual leader in the home, the odds are 97% or 93%. 93% of the time he's going to lead someone to Christ. It's very clear in the Bible, we're called to be the spiritual leaders. Men are called to be the spiritual leaders. And in a lot of cases, that doesn't happen. And I've said it many times in seminars and wherever, speaking at churches, that, the problem with the world and society today is not women at all. It's men. Somewhere along the way, men have dropped the ball, and they're not the spiritual leaders. And I think that's one thing that I personally, and I think you're on the same page with me, Terry, that we want to do with this podcast is just encourage our listeners to be that spiritual leader in their home.
Yep.
And because that's what we're called to do. And, hopefully you and I can, set the example and encourage our listeners to be that spiritual leader.
We were, my kids were there's a youth, kind of like a church camp organization called CIY, Christ in Youth, and they meet around different college campuses every year. My kids were down in Knoxville this week with our church youth group. It's just high school kids from all over come in, and they take over a college campus and basically have a church camp there. And so we went down to pick them up, and we went over to we were in Knoxville, so we went over to kind of the Pigeon Forge area. My son's always wanted to go to Dollywood, and we've always gone to the amusement parks and stuff because they like rides and they like Disney and all that stuff. So, I mean, good grief. I think there's a couple years we went to Disney twice in 1 year. And we were walking around the last 2 days at Dollywood, and no matter what show you went into at that place, they had Christian music. And a lot of it was like old hymns and stuff. But everywhere you went, there was a touch of Christianity at it, whether it was playing over the loudspeakers, whether it was inside the musical shows or what. I mean, they had like I'll Fly Away playing in the background when you're waiting in line for a roller coaster. And, you know, we were walking around, we saw the sign yesterday. They have this old, and I don't know if it was there before the park or they rebuilt it, but they had this old chapel in the middle. I mean, this is in the middle of the amusement park, Don. And they had a sign that says worship service Sundays at 10:30. I think it was 10:30 or 11. I can't remember. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. They're going to have church here. So we went to church, sitting in fold-out chairs in front of this old chapel in the middle of an amusement park, and there was people all over sitting around, and they had a minister come out. They had a song service, and it was an opportunity for me to talk to my son about what we do. And it was one of those kind of proud moments, and he said, Dad, this place has the best roller coasters of any other park we've ever been to. He said, at least when we give our money here, they're doing stuff to at least witness to the people walking in. He said, I'd rather just come back here. And I got to thinking to myself about, you know, kind of my position in the outdoor industry and me purchasing the items that I do. It's like if I have an opportunity to choose faith-based people or quality companies or quality people behind the organizations, I'm going to give my money to them, because at least I know I don't have to be a missionary and go to somewhere. But I know when I buy a Matthews bow, that part of that money that I'm given is going to fund digging a well and putting a missionary over it. Or if I buy a truck from Chris Yates, I know he's tithing on that money and running soup kitchens in the Kansas City area to feed the homeless. And it got me thinking about that text that we got from Chris, because, you know, we got our new trucks this week, and you know, Chris sent us this text to both of us saying how much he appreciated, you know, the trucks that we'd helped him sell. And I just flat out told him in that text, I was like, man, it's not about the truck for me. It's about you. And we believe in you.
Yeah, I told him too that I was sold on Chris Yates before I was sold on Chevy trucks. And it kind of really goes into what we stand for here. And, you know, we're going to hold our sponsors to a certain level of integrity, and just like we would anybody else. And, you know, we got sponsors like Matthews and Chris Yates Chevrolet, Victory Chevrolet, that believe exactly like we do. And those are the kind of companies and people that we want to team with.
I mean, it's when my son said it back to me like that, it's like they watch everything we do.
Yep.
You know, and it's like it was one of those moments when I said, okay, now's one of those times that all of those conversations that he's not supposed to hear, that he hears, just like every kid or every grandkid does. And, you know, I think about back to that scripture that our buddy Jimmy sent us this morning, how basically fathers are supposed to mirror, you know, the essence of what a father's role is. And I don't necessarily want to be my kid's friend. I want to have a relationship with him. I think about God and how he has a relationship, a one-on-one relationship with us. He has unconditional love for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But God's not scared to drop the hammer and punish you either. You know what I mean? And
right.
I think that's where at least some fathers, you know, they get too far gone where they don't want to drop that hammer. But you know, we have to make a commitment to the listeners of this podcast that, we're not going to jump ship and run around. And good grief, we even got a request to be the sponsor for the people who make the grooming stuff for your undercarriage. I don't know how that's supposed to make you a better hunter, but good grief, we've got people with clippers that won't nick you down there wanting to sponsor us. But we're not going to chase that stuff every single year. But at the same time, I want to make the commitment to our listeners that at the end of the year, when we sit down and have these follow-up meetings with our sponsors, we're going to talk about this stuff openly. And it's what outreaches are they supporting, the outreaches that we want to do with Lester's Feed or the communities. And, as long as they're giving, I don't care if they're giving in another area. But they have to be in alignment for what we want to do, both morally and ethically. And if not, we will move on for that reason to partner with the guys like Matthews and Chris Yates. You can talk a little bit about it. We even had a conference call with a company this week, and it was kind of funny when you really think about what this guy said.
Yeah, and another company that we didn't solicit whatsoever that reached out to us because I guess they like what we're doing, but the gentleman was going to fly in and meet with us, and I don't know, something came up that he couldn't make it. He's going to fly in later this summer, though, and but he did want to get on a conference call with us. And the crazy thing that one of the thing that really stuck with me about the whole conversation was, and then this guy's been in the hunting industry for a while too. He's been around. He's been on TV, and he's been affiliated with other companies and owned other companies in the hunting industry. We're not going to give his name away, so I promised him we wouldn't. But he said, and I'll quote, "There are more ethical people in the illegal drug business than in the hunting industry." I started chuckling when he said that, and I got to thinking, he might be right. And that's not to bash everyone in the hunting industry, but there are some very, very unethical people from a business standpoint in the hunting industry. And I'm talking, I've had a couple of experiences with people that were supposed to be Christians that I'm telling you what, they did some things that I would not do. And I don't claim to be the judge of anyone else, but I just say they've done some things to me that I would not have done to them.
Yeah.
Leave it at that.
Well, I think there's a level of loyalty that is completely gone anymore. It's obvious when you watch any of the outdoor shows, whatever they can promote to make a buck, they're doing it, and then it's a different flavor the following season, or even not even making it through the season. But those close to it, we don't want to ruin it for everybody. The purpose of even talking about it is there are good people out there. And
yep.
You and I have gone, how many years have you been hunting?
I finished my 43rd season. This will be my 44th this fall.
So, and I've been hunting 26. We bought all of our stuff all this time anyway. We don't need someone to financially, and we're not bragging, but Don and I, we're in a better place than we were 20 years ago, right? Financially.
For sure.
We don't need someone to give us free product. We don't need someone to pay us for this. Our obligation to this with this podcast is, buddy, if you're on a different page than us, proceed with your page, but we're not going to be there with you. And I keep thinking back to, sitting in that amusement park today with, would you ever believe Disney would do that?
Oh no. And you know what? Since you brought up Disney, I refused to take my kids to Disney when they were younger because of Disney's stand on homosexuality.
Right.
When they started having gay day at Disney World, I told my kids we're not going.
Yep. So, I was stewing about this all day, and here we are sitting in a park that, they choose not to serve alcohol. They choose to show their faith. All their shows encourage the performers to do it. And it's kind of like that decision that we made with Real World years ago. When we have a choice, we're always going to work with people that we know are going to be a witness to someone somewhere. And, we went through a period, before we had some changes in who all was with Real World. We'd say that, but we really wouldn't do it. And to his credit, we pick on Wes a lot, but when Wes came on, and folks, he won't listen to this, so I can say it. Wes is cheap. And I mean, he's cheap. So when he came on board, though, and we talked about this, he was all for it. And I have no doubt that is part of why we've been so blessed with just absolutely crazy exponential growth since Wes came on board. I think our commitment to doing that is just fantastic. Now, I will say we're going to have a listener send us something somewhere, but we called my mom on the way home today, and she was on the speakerphone of the truck, and I was telling her about it, and she goes, "Well, I read on the internet somewhere that Dolly has a transvestite day or something like that." So all of that hope I had in the decency of Dollywood might be down the drain. I told my son he better get on that and fact check it, but I might not be giving any amusement park any of my money if that's the case. So, but speaking of new trucks. I drove my truck to Tennessee and back after coming home from Illinois. How much have you driven yours much?
Yeah, I got almost 1,000 miles on it.
I'm about double you.
Yeah.
I've had it since Tuesday.
You had to come and get it at Illinois, and that added probably at least 200, probably 300
more than
miles.
that.
Huh?
Each way, yeah. And then I drove to Tennessee, so I'm almost at 2,000 miles right now and had it since Tuesday. Chris and Colby drove them up, and we got to spend some time with them on Tuesday morning, and them showing us all the buttons in it. And then they drove our two trucks back. So I don't think we've done a real good job at really telling people about the deal for a few weeks. And I know based on our analytics, we got a bunch of new listeners that have come in. So Chris's kind of niche that he's found is he's found a way, and the interesting thing he told us at breakfast Tuesday morning is he's been doing this deal since 2012. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
So if you buy a diesel truck from him, he will trade it in at between around 25,000 miles after a year for $5,000. Every single year you come back to him with $5,000 and you get a new truck. So he first did it for all the farmers out in his area, but it's grown, and we've kind of got him in touch with a kind of a different demographic around the country, and it's the outdoors guys, the guys with campers, the guys that want to pull their enclosed trailers or hunting rigs, and he's done really well. But it's kind of a niche it's kind of a niche plan since you can't lease a 3/4 ton truck, and I like the fact of never having to worry about maintenance anymore.
Well, the deal is an absolute no-brainer when you think about it, and everybody seems to think there's a catch, and I think you even did too, Terry, at the beginning.
My wife's an accountant, and she thought there was, but
yeah, there's no catch, and what I tell everybody, so you go buy a new truck today, and you take Chris's deal, and every year you trade for $5,000, you get a new truck. Or you buy a new truck today and you just keep it. And in 10 years, what do you got? If you take Chris's deal, in 10 years you spent $50,000 and you're still in a new truck every single year. You've never bought tires. You've always been under warranty. If you don't trade, in 10 years, the truck you bought is going to depreciate at least that $50,000, maybe more. And you're going to have to buy tires and maintenance and everything else all through that 10-year period once it's out of warranty. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Yeah, and I had a good conversation. Our friend Brian Kraft from Midwest Land Group and I were talking because he was a huge donor to the Lester's feed auction. Him and I were on the phone this week, and his real estate company out of Kansas, they use 3/4 ton trucks. And he's like, Terry, it's a great deal because, and he even said it, whether you're a farmer, whether you're a business, whether you're an outdoorsman, your truck is a tool, just like everything else you buy. And he actually has gotten to the point with his accountant that they know how much those vehicles depreciate every year. So the first year he said it was like $14,000. That truck, any truck, that when you drive it off the lot, it's it's 14,000 depreciation, and then after that it's like $7,000. And he goes, when you put it that way, $5,000, you're actually ahead of the depreciation every year. But the way Chris pulls this off is he said that there's one vehicle in the world that you could do this deal on, and that's a Duramax 3/4 ton or ton truck, because they just don't depreciate that much. So we've actually sent so many people to Chris, and he's getting ready to take an awesome trip to Africa on a hunting trip. We hope he has a great trip. But we need to start kind of divvying up some to Chris and his main right-hand guy, Colby. So if you have questions about this deal, send Don or I a private message, and we will get you in touch with either Chris or Colby at Victory Chevrolet. And no matter where you're at across the country, he said he told us he sold a truck to Idaho. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I mean, he sold
and I think he sold another one to North Carolina or South Carolina,
yeah,
too.
And then one in Florida. There's been Connecticut's and New York. So he can have those trucks shipped to you. You don't have to drive all the way to Kansas City to get them if you don't want to. So get in touch with us. We'll connect you with either Chris or Colby. And I promise you, you will not find, if you want to drive a new truck, and it does take money to get into the deal. There's no doubt about it, but you can pay cash or you can finance it. It doesn't matter. I financed mine. And the kicker with this thing, Don, is if you have a truck that you financed right now, what Chris told me is you're never going to find a better time to get out of that deal that you're in and into this deal, because the value of your used truck that you would trade in that you currently have financed is never going to be worth more than what it is. I actually traded my Ford truck in that I just bought in September. That was my biggest concern. I traded my truck in and traded it in for more than what I bought the truck for. So the new truck. So, I was worried that I was going to take a bath on the truck that was only 10 months old, but it ended up this is the perfect time to get out of that and get into one of these deals if you're interested. But for more, we don't want to take more time on the podcast. If you want more information on that, get with Don or I, and we'll get you in touch with it. So let's talk about Unit 8 or Zone 8 in Iowa for a minute.
Yeah, I drew a tag. Found out Friday afternoon that the results started coming out, and I got my Zone 8 tag for Iowa. So I'm headed back this week. I had cameras scattered in some different units, and I'm going to gather all them up when I'm coming back to Unit 8, and I'm going to spend 2 or 3 days there putting cameras out and seeing what I can find. I don't have a giant to chase in Iowa yet, but one thing that's interesting I want to throw out, I just drew the tag Friday, and this trip that I'm getting ready to make this week will be my 5th scouting trip to Iowa. And people that think that, I've got these, well-managed properties, big properties, food plots everywhere, and all types of habitat work done on them, that's not the case. My 5th trip to Iowa looking for a giant. I have not found one yet, but I'm going to continue all summer long right into hunting season and see what I can find. So we'll detail that on this podcast. So next week I'll talk about my trip to Iowa that is going to happen this coming week.
Awesome. I did see in the news that there's something percolating out in Arizona. Did you see that?
Yeah, about the trail cameras. They're thinking about outlawing trail cameras for hunting in Arizona.
What do you think about that?
Well, I've got mixed feelings, really. I mean, I use trail cameras. I'll be the first to admit that I would not have killed some of the bigger bucks that I've shot had it not been for trail cameras. But, at the same time, I just don't see any organization in the hunting community really stepping up to the plate. I know Pope and Young has a little bit, but when it comes to drawing the line on ethics, hunting ethics, nobody's really doing it. And, where does it end? The crazy thing that I see is the whitetail especially seems to adapt to whatever we throw at it. Right. And So I don't, I'm sure there's been some big deer killed because of trail cameras, and I'll continue to use them. But I like to see somebody addressing ethics in the hunting industry. Not saying that I agree with this or disagree, but I'm kind of neutral on it, I guess, if you want to know the truth.
Yeah, I think this is where a lot of people are going to have to make the decision that it's kind of theirs,
Yeah.
If you feel morally obligated about it, I think you should do what you feel right, it's kind of like that. You know that stuff, like what your dad squashed when you were a kid, still goes on today. So,
Right.
With the tags. So, well, anyway, I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to watch that unfold and navigate itself. So,
Hey,
yep.
I've said many times that it's not my place to push my ethics on someone else. Ethics is an individual choice. I just like to see, individuals, organizations, whatever, taking a stand on hunting ethics, and so that I'll leave it at that for that issue.
You were on 2 different podcasts, I believe, in the last week. Talk About It, and then Habitat podcast, and I listened to both of them while I was traveling this week, and I think you mentioned, I think, on both of them that people need to understand that the purpose of this podcast and kind of our niche is not campfires and hunting camp. It's to talk about what's different when you dedicate yourself, or your goal is to kill a buck that's 5 years old or older, and to see how much different that is than just the I want to say, like, the kind of the social side of what the hunting outdoors industry really is, and I think you did a really good job clarifying, because everybody kind of was trying to prime you up and maybe get you on a rant with the doe factory thing or the no food in the summer thing, just to see what you do. And I think you did a really good job clarifying about what we try to do on this podcast. And it's just to separate out. And it doesn't mean that the people that listen to this podcast have to fully dedicate to the level that you are. And I'm not at the level you are by any means, but I think, it's just when you get to the point that you're doing the things you're doing, trying to chase an Iowa giant, you've already made 5 trips out there. They don't see that kind of stuff, and that's what we're trying to elaborate. And even stuff to the effect of expandable broadheads and the risk that is when you're chasing this, or the trail cameras you use when you're chasing these. It's so rare to get the opportunity to kill the bucks that you're killing. The chances just have to be minimized and minimized and minimized and minimized until you can't have equipment or any other failures, because you only get one shot usually, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And, there's a difference between deer hunting advice and hunting mature buck advice. And that's what makes us different. That's not really putting down folks that give good deer hunting advice. We were all at that stage at one point, and I don't want to sound like I'm bashing those folks at all, but when it comes to hunting mature bucks, everybody, it seems like I hear from a lot of people various ways, emails, text, whatever, and consulting clients. Everybody wants to kill giant bucks, but most people don't understand the dedication that it takes to do it consistently. And that's just what we're trying to get across, is that, hey, you can do it. I fully believe anybody can do it, but it's going to take a little bit more dedication than it does just to go out and kill an average buck.
There's no elevator to get to that point. You got to take the stairs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
and every floor is a different lesson or different thing that you have to experience. You can't go from 1 to 20 overnight. And whether that's developing your property or you learning or you becoming more disciplined and making mistakes. So I think it's just, I think you did a really good job for those guys those were two really good podcast interviews that you did, the Talk About It, and then our friends over at Habitat Podcast, two great episodes that aired this week. I do appreciate both of those organizations plugging Lester's feet as much as they have. That's been a huge blessing to have, and Pro Talk even has supported us. It's been a lot that these other organizations and podcasts have jumped on board too.
Yeah, and we're getting down to the last couple of weeks, really.
Yep.
We're gonna it's probably 2 weeks from tonight, isn't it? It's 2 weeks from tonight.
Yep.
That we'll be drawing the winners. So if you're listening, you don't have much time. Get your tickets in, and we'll be announcing winners soon.
So for our new listeners, basically what happened is Don and I tried to find ways to help. It started with the Ward family that had 2 little girls with leukemia. And Don kind of stepped up and said, let's do more. We got to do more. It's kind of taking that advice from Matt McPherson. For those who have a lot, a lot is expected. And Don wanted to auction or raffle a hunt on his farm. And then I said, yep, let's do this, all in. And when we really got to thinking about it, we knew that the outdoor community would jump on board with the opportunity to hunt Don's home farm, and it would probably raise a lot of money. And neither one of us wanted that kind of money running through our personal checking accounts, and not having the accountability to the people who participated in it. So we started an organization, a foundation called Lester's Feet. And as we've navigated this thing for all the new listeners out there, where our niche is we want to go and help families who have kids with life-altering illnesses. So what happens is, insurance is usually pretty good. Some of the kids that are disabled are even on, I might get the terms wrong, but they get government assistance like Medicaid or something like that. But what no one realizes is these parents usually have to take FMLA or medical leave or quit their jobs to take care of those kids. And in many cases, if they're getting some type of treatment, where they live is not close to where the treatments are. So they end up sometimes having to go with temporary housing or renting an apartment while they're not working. So all these other peripheral bills start stacking up, even beyond what health insurance would pay for or grant money that the social worker might put them in touch with. And where our kind of niche is we step in, and since we have a board of directors that holds accountable on where we send money and what we do, but where our niche is we can go in and say, okay, this family is living in another city. Neither one of them are working because they're taking care of that kid full time. Is your house payment getting paid? Is your car payment getting paid? Do you need help with logistics going to another city, whether it's airfare or food or gas or even the short-term apartment that they have to stay in? We don't have any of that red tape, and we can come in and pay bills directly for these families that are trying to navigate their day-to-day financial obligations while they're not able to work taking care of sick kiddos. And that's what we're about. So quick update. It's really hard for me to exactly give a count because there's so many mail-in checks that we're having to still deposit. And, there's an online system at SC Online Sales where you can buy tickets through June 30th. The window of where we cut off for checks to be sent has already passed. If you still want to contribute, send me a private message on social media. I might still be able to make something work, but we got to move fast. But Dawn, I'm really, really thinking we're creeping up to that mid 60,000 and almost pushing 70,000 on this thing. I hate to say it, but I had a goal of 50,000 and we've blown that out already. That we know that. I'd really like to get this thing over $75,000 by the end of the month.
Well, hopefully we got some listeners out there that'll contribute. And the other thing that we do that you didn't mention, Terry, is that we're trying to help folks connected with this podcast. So if you're listening and you know a family with a sick child who has some financial struggles, reach out to us. We want to help folks connected with us because, the money's coming from our listeners. We want to help our listeners.
Right.
So.
We want to be one big family here. So if you want to buy tickets, go to SC, that's samcatonlinesales.com, click the Outdoors tab, and you'll see the Lester's Feet. That will be open until June 30th. If you need to send a check, contact me as soon as possible. We'll try to figure something out. No more checks can be mailed into SC Online Sales. Let me make that clear. No more checks mailed to SC Online Sales. That will be for internet purchases only. If you need to mail in a check, get with me, and I'll try to help work something out. But Don and I are going to figure out a way to be in person. I think we're even going to try to video this on a YouTube or Facebook Live. We're even though we can use the computer to make it easy on us, we're still going to draw names and have fun with this. So over 65 prizes, and the grand prize is going to be a hunt on Don's home farm, and then obviously there's a prize for a hunt on my farm. So just super, super great opportunity to help families. 1 ticket for $25, 5 tickets for $100, and you can buy as many as you want. Let's ring this thing up for a bunch of kids to get some help for their families. So if you're all right with that, let's move on to the buyafarm.com property of the week.
Buyafarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Okay, this week's featured property is an online auction for 80 acres. It's located 4 miles southeast of Norris City, Illinois. It's of that 80 acres, there's about 70 of it that's tillable with good quality soils. There's an abandoned farmstead on the property, some old oil wells and stuff, but there's no mineral or lease income at this time. The reason that I selected this property is two. One, I think it can be bought for a good price, a fair price, but I really like the way it lays out for a habitat guru that wants to just go out there and basically start with a blank canvas and turn this into a really good hunting property. This lays out perfect for it. I think it's broke up into about 5 different fields. But there's road access on 2 sides, and I think you could turn it into a place where you could kill a big buck pretty consistently, maybe every year. You could sign up those fields for CRP, and plant some switchgrass and such. Put your food plots exactly where you want them. Lay out the cover around those food plots and such. But the bidding closes on July 22nd at 8 p.m. If you're interested, you can call Agent Wayne Keller. Wayne's phone number is 618-407-1679. Just go to the buyafarm.com website. There on the homepage, you should see the upcoming auctions and look for the 80 acres.
Very cool. Make sure you go check out buyafarm.com or follow their social media for all of the pictures and information about this and other properties. So I didn't ask you if this was okay to do this, but I know you're not going to care. I want to take a quick minute and let everybody know down in Southeast Ohio an event that's getting ready to happen. Our good friend Mr. Hickson, Mr. Hickson.
Yep.
And
Rich.
And his buddy Eric Perry. I think Eric's done all the heavy lifting for this, but and forgive me, Eric, if I get this wrong, but there's an event getting ready to happen on July 17th next month down at the Columbia Township Volunteer Fire Department. I think that's is it Meigs County? Is that how you say that, Meigs County? Southeast Ohio. July 17th, a great outdoor extravaganza. And there is a grant that Eric filed for with the Ohio DNR to help basically do hunting clinics. So they're hosting this thing at the fire hall, free to attend, free food, and they're going to have all kinds of classes. The guys at Exodus are coming down to do a class on maximizing your trail cameras. Rich is going to do he owns a company called Tagged Out Seed Products, a real world dealer. He's going to do a food plot class. There's going to be firearm safety classes both for adults and kids, and the main speaker is Tate Hale, who is our buddy that we helped get that electric bike for. He's had an amputee. He was a college athlete, great motivational speaker. And they got a bunch of prizes that they're going to be doing raffles on. And, Don, they're going to donate 50% of the funds that are raised for the event go to the local volunteer fire department. And the other 50%, they're going to write a check to Lester's Feet to help us with helping these families. So I appreciate Eric Perry, even if he didn't want to put the other half of this to Lester's Feet. Just a great event, and we appreciate obviously Rich supporting that. Also, great guys. And if you're in Southeast Ohio, your best thing to do is go search for this event on Facebook, the Great Outdoor Extravaganza. They can even do tickets for the prizes, which is going to be a Matthews bow. There's going to be Wise-Eye and Exodus trail cameras, all different kinds of stuff, but they can do PayPal. You don't even have to be there to win. So find out more information, go to the Great Outdoor Extravaganza July 17th Facebook page, or if you can't find it, send me a private message. I'll put you in touch with Eric or Rick. So thanks, guys, for doing that. We appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, so
ready for some submitted questions?
Yep, let's get through some tonight.
All right, the first one comes from Matt Gardner from Morton, Illinois. Matt says, I have 2 questions to submit. Feel free to use either. I bought a 40-acre farm last year that is 50% timber and 50% tillable. My question is, what is your recommendation as far as keeping the tillable in ag production or looking at placing it in a CRP program? And regarding CRP contracts, what are the disadvantages to signing those contracts and entering those agreements? I have heard a lot of people state that you have to determine if you want to enter into a contract with the government when you opt to go in with a CRP program. Matt goes on. I'm going to answer this one before I get into a second question. Matt, without seeing your property, there's no way that I can advise you to keep farming that tillable ground or put it into CRP. Just really would need to put boots on the ground to advise you there. But in regards to advantages, disadvantages to the CRP contracts, the advantage is that you're getting money from the government to create habitat. And these are either 10 or 15-year programs. So, you're guaranteed that money for 10 or 15 years. The disadvantage is that you're in a contract with the government. You change your mind halfway in and you could get out of it, but you got to pay all that money back. And towards the end of that contract, you're looking at a lot of money that they've invested. So you're pretty much stuck most of the time with that contract. I've entered into numerous CRP contracts on more than one property, and it's never been an issue for me. I know exactly what I want when I enter into that program. I know kind of how the programs work, so I'm not going into it blind. But I think it's a great way to create wildlife habitat and let the government pay you for it. It sure beats doing it for free and having to pay for it all yourself. So that's kind of my 2 cents on CRP. You want to add anything there, Terry, before I go on to the second part? Or?
I've heard you say a bunch of times to look for the weakest link. So he's asking you to help him make that decision without seeing it, which is impossible. But if you were standing there, you're probably going to zoom out and look at an aerial and find out what the weakest link of that property is going to be in the surrounding areas. Is it food or is it bedding? And that's going to help judge your decision. So that's it.
Yep. Okay, I'll move on. Matt goes on to say, second question is, I know that you say human intrusion is the biggest detriment to holding large bucks. Obviously, with only 40 acres, I may never hold a 180 to 200 class deer, but I do have properties that surround me that have very little intrusion. With placing food plots on the farm and doing normal maintenance on trails and stands, you will have human intrusion on any farm. If you could go into a little more detail on how you manage your farm, but also keep human intrusion to a minimum. I occasionally will take my kids on a four-wheeler through my trails once or twice a month, as well as normal maintenance that takes place. Just trying to figure out how to properly manage the farm with the least amount of human intrusion. Any input on this would be appreciated. Thanks, Don. I really enjoy your podcast and the information you give, and more importantly, what you stand for. Good luck this year. Human intrusion. One thing that jumps out at me, Matt, right out of the gate, you said, obviously, with only 40 acres, I may never hold a 180 to 200 class deer. I think that is a misunderstanding on your part and probably a lot of other listeners' part. The size of the property has no bearing on the size of the bucks that you can hold there. Now, the layout of the property does, but I know of a lot of 40-acre properties that can hold giant bucks, and some of the bucks that I've shot come off a very small farm. So
well,
don't get
real quick before you go on.
Go ahead.
Before you go on, there's a clarification here that I think also needs to be made, and it's not just the size of the buck, but the age structure of that buck. As that buck
Right.
as that buck gets older, if the property's laid out correctly and it's the right spot, you might be more likely to hold an upper age class buck, depending on what's around it. So I think people always focus on the score. We're talking about the age class of bucks first, because you have to have that to have the score.
That's a very good point, Terry.
So go.
If
I
he's
just
a
want to make.
4-year-old buck,
Yep.
He might score 140. He might score 240.
Right.
So that's a very good point on the age. Moving on to the part about human intrusion, how to keep it to a minimum. Another thing that really jumped out at me is you talk about taking your kids on a four-wheeler ride through the trails once or twice a month. Right there's the human intrusion that could be cut down, but I want to stress that, I want you to keep your priorities in order. Don't neglect those kids by any means. But when it comes to human intrusion, that's not a good thing. So you might have a farm where you do that, maybe on your home farm. It's not one that you're planning to shoot bigger bucks, but if you've got other properties, like you mentioned, that's where you focus your efforts. But when I talk about how do I keep down human intrusion on my farm, well, basically it's in certain areas. My human intrusion is limited to like my food plots and around the edge of those plots and things like that. I've got a huge sanctuary that I'll go in there in the winter if need be, and I'll do, habitat projects, maintenance work, cutting trees to make for thicker cover or whatever. But I don't stretch it out over weeks of time. I go in there and I try to get it done in a day or two, and that's it for the entire winter, and get out and stay out. So you can limit it by limiting the number of days you go into doing it, limiting the activities. You mentioned you've got trails on your property. Well, that's one thing you probably need to get rid of. That's another thing that just invites human intrusion. So I don't know if I've answered your question adequately enough, but that's my answer for sure.
It goes back to what we talked about in the beginning. Matt has to make a decision that's best for him, his family, and what he wants to get out of that property. This podcast is about increasing your odds to kill older age class bucks consistently. And it's a sacrifice. You can't have everything. You can't have a four-wheeler trails and pass and be able to cut firewood all spring and summer and then expect for there to be upper age class bucks there. To do what Don Higgins does. People don't understand it. They don't see it. The sacrifice he has to make with his property, with how he does stuff, the financial investment, the lack of, you could rent a whole lot more of your farm out to ag and get more money for it than what you do. it's a sacrifice to commit to doing this much for a consistent shot at upper age class bucks. And anything that you're doing from a recreational standpoint on that property besides deer habitat decreases that chance. So it's not my or Don's decision what you do with your property, but if you really want to take your best chance on killing upper age class bucks every year, you shut everything down on that property. I mean, I know it sounds kind of blunt. That was kind of mean, maybe, but
I think it's very well said.
It's just a decision.
Better than I did.
It's a decision that landowner has to make. You're the one that pays the payment and the property taxes on it. Do with it what you want. But, everybody wants to kill a monster deer or a 6 or 7 year old buck, but they're not willing to take the sacrifice to it. So that's what this podcast is about. You have to weigh those options and say, okay, I'm willing to do this, or I'm willing to sacrifice this side of my farm, not this side. Put your priorities in order with what you need to do with your family and your faith, and then make the best decision for you.
Well said. Well said, Terry.
All right, we got time for definitely one, maybe two.
Okay. The next one comes from Russ Parkins from Ozarks, Missouri. Russ says, "Hi, fellas. I have 5 acres of wooded hills in the Ozarks. I'm surrounded by several hundred acres of similar wooded cattle grazing land. There are no crop fields anywhere nearby. Hunting pressure is light to moderate. What would you recommend I do to make my little piece of land stand out and attract deer? Thanks for your help." Well, Russ, the reason I picked your question is I was on a farm just like yours in your area last winter. And so I know exactly what you're talking about. And to be honest, of all the property I've ever consulted on, that property had less deer sign than any of the others I've ever seen. And it was just woods forever down there in those Ozark Mountains. And I told the landowner, and we found the places to do it, he needs to provide as much food as he possibly can. The weakest link in that area was not cover, because there was cover everywhere you turned. The weakest link in that area was quality food sources. So you need to, provide as much food as you possibly can on that property. And all the listeners, it doesn't matter where your property is located. Think about what is the weakest link in your area, not your property, but your whole area, your neighborhood, your whole township. What's the weakest link? And that's what you provide. If it's security, then that's what you need to provide: security cover, bedding cover for those deer during the day. But in this case, it's food. There's no doubt it's food. And Russ, you just need to provide as much food as you possibly can.
Okay. Good question. I think a lot of people struggle with that because they want the quick fix. They want to say, okay, I'm going to plant food. Where's my booner? Or I want to plant switchgrass and it hasn't germinated in 4 days. What's going on?
Yep.
It's a process and a patience thing when you're really setting all of this up.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
You got time for another one?
Yeah, let's do another one.
Next one comes from Mike Schulte from McFarland, Wisconsin. Mike says, "Don and Terry, first of all, love the podcast and all the info. It's exactly what I was looking for and not sure how I hadn't heard it before. After hearing the Masterclass podcast and your stance on hinge cutting, I'm trying to understand your stance better and why you don't use it. If trees won't be harvested, locust, mulberry, hackberry, etc., what is the benefit of not hinging selected areas? It seems to me you get much more benefit of that with a single hinge cut and providing browse, of which I have heard makes up 70% of a deer's diet. In addition to the energy consumption benefit of deer in harsh time being able to eat where they bed and also reduce stress on your plots. I know only a percentage of hinge trees survive anyway, but I'm just interested in your take of some survival versus cutting them complete. And after hearing how open your one area was with a noticeable browse line, couldn't have hinging trees in there helped. Sorry for the long question. Feel free to paraphrase. Thanks for all the info and keep up the great podcast. Best of luck this season." Well, Mike, my opposition to hinge cutting is basically you're ruining that tree. That tree, once you hinge cut it, it's never going to have timber value. And if that's the case, why not replace it with something that will? And hinging that tree, it's still alive. That root system is still alive, competing with other trees around it. The top of that tree is still alive, shading the ground. I just as soon cut that tree, let the root system die, let the better trees that you leave around it occupy that space in the root zone to grow bigger and faster. Kill that tree top, but let it lay there on the ground. It'll provide cover. The deer will bed around it. But within that tree top, there'll be plants that come up, tree seedlings, for example, that are kind of protected from the deer somewhat. Like white oaks, for example, are kind of slow to grow when they're started. Actually, they're slow to grow all the time, but especially when they're in that seedling stage and they're competing with vegetation around them. What happens is a lot of times the deer come and browse them off. They never get a chance to establish because the deer just continually browse them off. Well, when there's a treetop laying there, various woody vegetation and can grow within that treetop and be protected from browsing deer for a while. And you just want to get that sunlight on the ground too. That sunlight promotes all kinds of weed growth, briars, saplings, whatever. And all that is food and browse for the deer. So rather than have an area that's just a bunch of hinge cut trees, I would rather have an area where the sunlight's hitting the ground and promoting that sort of growth. So you're going to get the browse either way. I would just as soon get those trees that are going to have no value in the future out of the way and allow the better ones to live and grow faster. Anything to add there, Terry?
I've never hinge cut a tree, and I don't know that much about it, but I can relate to Mike trying to understand it. And there's not very many of us that's been in your sanctuary. Usually you're only going in there when we're doing the one shed hunt of the year. But I remember being in the woods when we shed hunt and seeing how far we could see. And when you saw it in there, you're like, this has got to change. I could not believe how thick it was just that same spring. So you went in there, cut those trees, let them fall, killed the trees like you were talking about. I did stick my head, I didn't walk all in, but I did stick my head kind of into the same area and look down at the same area. I could not believe how thick it was just by letting the sunlight hit that floor, how much came back. And I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm by no means a tree expert and never done a forestry plan in my life. I would bet, based on what I saw, what you did that project on the front side of your sanctuary, there was more browse by terminating that tree and letting everything come up, because it just wasn't the tree, part of the tree. And Mike mentioned that a lot of trees don't even make it when they hinge cut. I would be willing to bet that there was more vegetation, more undergrowth, because you killed the tree, then you dropped it and tried to let it live for just the leaves that were on that tree. That's just my observation and learning from being around it with you.
In a lot of cases, you're exactly right. You do create more browse. But at the same time, you're also creating ground cover. You got that dead treetop laying there.
Either way, you got a treetop there, right?
Yeah.
So
it's just whether it has leaves on it, and if it does, it's shading the ground.
So all you business guys that do your T chart, both cases when you drop that tree, whether it's hinge cut or whether you kill it, you got a treetop laying there. Then one side, everybody wants to run to hinge cutting, and like I said, I've never done either one of them. I've just walked into an area that you've killed everything and dropped those trees, and I'm telling you, it's a jungle. It's not just one tree laying there with everything else still dead on the ground around it because the sunlight doesn't get to the floor. I mean, it grows quick. I could not believe how fast everything grew back.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I also try to always promote being a good steward of the resource. And we've got guys running around there like maniacs with chainsaws all over the country now because of this hinge cutting craze. And they're cutting trees. I mean, we're talking guys that don't know an oak from a maple. In the wintertime when they don't have their leaves on them, they don't know an oak from a maple, let alone a red oak from a white oak, from a pin oak or whatever. And we've destroyed so much timber in the name of hinge cutting for deer that it's crazy. We can be better stewards of the resource than that. We can be great deer managers and also great managers of the timber. And I just don't think hinge cutting is a tool for it. Now, with that said, there are situations where I have hinge cut.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's good trees around, then I don't want to be hinge cut. I want to be just cutting that tree down and letting that sunlight and the root zone go to that better tree,
right,
and allow that better tree to grow faster.
It's like, do you want weeds in your food plot taking up all the money that you spent on fertilizer and lime, soaking all that up instead of your soybeans or your corn?
Yep.
The weeds don't really hurt anything, but why are you letting something that's not valuable that won't affect the deer? Now, I could totally see on my property up there in Illinois where we put the stand on the downwind side of that bedding cover. I could totally see in there dropping a tree and hinge cutting it and keeping it alive to divert the deer within bow range on one side of that or another. But to go in there on that whole flat and hinge cut that to try to create cover, I don't get it. But, there are some trees, and they're big mature trees in there. If I wanted to turn that into bedding, cutting that canopy out, I'm telling you, people, you would not believe this place that Don cut last year. If you want to create browse, it's not by hinge cutting. That's and it's not my opinion. It's an observation of what I've seen with both scenarios, because my lease in Illinois had, I literally come to Don every time I go over to that property and say, what was this guy thinking that set this farm up before us? I don't get it. He walks through the middle of his food plots to get back to his stands. I'm just sitting there trying to figure this out. And there is a section of that farm that he went in and hinge cut and just totally destroyed it. And it's nothing there and worth anything now. Not other than the dead trees laying there, which you would have had to begin with. So just observation. I'm not an expert by any means on it.
Well, one last thought on hinge cutting. Hinge cutting is not going to help you kill mature deer. Hinge cutting can make for great deer habitat, no doubt about it. But hinge cutting versus dropping trees, one or the other is not going to help you kill mature deer. So I don't want you to think that, like Terry said earlier, we're talking about what it takes to kill mature bucks, not just kill good deer. And hinge cutting versus just dropping trees like I promote is not going to take you to where you want to be if your goal is to kill mature deer.
All right. Well, man, that was a diverse podcast episode there. We covered a lot of different things and referenced the drug cartel even. So that might have to be the title of this one.
Well, it might get people listening for sure.
Oh, but goodness sakes.
One thing I'll throw out, I got a couple of quick notes before we sign off here, Terry.
Yeah.
First of all, my people have been submitting questions to the podcast, and I haven't been getting them for a couple of weeks, maybe longer than that. And I got with our website guy yesterday, and he has forwarded me a bunch of questions. So if you recently submitted a question that you thought was a good one, you can't believe we didn't pick it, it's because I didn't see it. But I've got all those to go through for the next few episodes. One other thing I would like to ask our listeners is, I know Terry's not going to mention this himself. His mother is having very serious surgery Tuesday, and we would appreciate prayers for her. So please keep Terry's mother and his entire family in prayers this week, and pray that she comes through this surgery with flying colors and is back home soon.
Appreciate that.
You're welcome. If you don't have any other notes, I'll take us out.
Have at it.
All right. We want to thank our sponsors, BuyAFarm.com, 360 Hunting Blinds, Real World Wildlife Products, Victory Chevrolet, WildlifeFarming.com, Vortex Optics, Lone Wolf Tree Stands, Quiet Cat Bikes, and Matthews Archery. Have a good week, everyone.